What's cracking, everyone? My name is Ryan, and today I have another CanJam video for you. Now, to kind of set this video up, I do want to let you guys know ahead of time that you're not going to get a ton of detailed impressions of gear from me out of this video, simply because that was not my goal when I went to this CanJam. In fact, this was a last minute thing. When I was at Chicago, I was talking to Warren of Heddphone, and among others, they really encouraged me to be able to come to this CanJam. The only way I was able to do that last minute is, one, I couldn't bring my wife, Bree, which I was extremely bummed about because she is kind of my social buffer. You know, she's the extrovert, I'm the introvert. Having her with me really helps get me out of my shell a little bit. So I didn't have Bree with me on this one. She had to stay home with the kids, but I was able to fly out. And so I kind of want to talk to you about my experiences I had, meeting people at CanJam, talking to all different vendors out there. I do have some gear impressions to cover, and that was more on day 2 as I kind of roll through this video. So I want to kind of set this up and talk about my flight in. Now, this was my first time ever visiting California. I'm a Midwestern Indiana boy, so I don't travel much. When I travel, it's like Florida or something like that, right? It's not California. So I flew in, and as soon as I landed, got off my plane, I headed to the Irvine Hotel, the Marriott there. That is where I stayed. That's where CanJam was. And wouldn't you know it, after I put my stuff down, I'm kind of walking around and I hear somebody going, "Hey, Ryan." And I turn around and it's Bevan and Zach of ZMF, and he had his team there. And they were just sitting down having drinks and, being the super nice people that they are, they invited me over. I sat down with them. I had a drink. I had some food, kind of relaxed and chilled. And this is kind of my ongoing theme of talking to you guys about CanJam was this first night, in that we didn't talk about audio. I mean, maybe a little bit, but this was really just talking to Zach and Bevan and his team about what they do, how they got started and things. And I just really enjoyed that experience of talking with them and just getting to know them instead of just knowing them for the gear that I love to listen to, right? So anyways, after that, kind of went back to my room and then got some sleep and rolled into the first day of CanJam. All right, so day 1 was special for me because I finally got to meet a buddy of mine that I've only talked to through Discord and through forums and things, and that's Tyler of Tyler's Eclectic. Sorry, man. I was really looking forward to meeting him because we have talked so much and share so much in common with this hobby and just our impressions and our feelings around it and, what we think is important. So, getting to hook up with him and, just spend that first day at CanJam together, walking around and meet people was an experience you don't get very often, especially because we live on, opposite sides of the country almost. So very nice to meet Tyler. And I don't want to go too much into all the things that Tyler and I discovered together because him and I just did a live stream. And if you guys want to check that out, I highly encourage you to do so. I will pop that up in the video or in the description down below. And we talk about our experience with CanJam. But him and I both had the same focus with this. And that was not so much on the gear. It was more on just the people and the networking and getting to connect with, a lot of people in the community that we normally wouldn't, was our goal. So I met up with him. I bumped into Warren right away from Heddphone, bumped into the whole Heddphone group again as they were at the table. I got my shirt, got everything scanned in, and wouldn't you know it, the first room that we hit, because they weren't quite ready to start yet, was ZMF. And, it's always going to be the highlight of my CanJam experience, even though I may not always like to say that, but it truly is. I mean, ZMF is just the special part of audio for me, and it always will be. And so entering that room, by no surprise, Zach had his very beautiful setup of headphones. They had their amps, they had the new JDS Labs amp, they had the new headphone that he's now called the Bokeh. Tomato. I mean, whichever way you want to say that, there's actually a post about the name, which is kind of funny, but it is the effect that you get when you take a picture. It's that, out of focus background that you get. That's kind of the bokeh that you get. I'm just going to stop saying that. But I mean, it was nice to see that out and kind of in its finalized state. I do have an impression on that, and I'm going to talk about that as I get into the impression part of my video. And that's more on day 2. So, after, meeting up with Zach and Bevan and his team and talking with them a little bit, we headed out and went into the main room. And I got to say, my only experience with CanJam so far was in Chicago. So in Chicago, the main room was still very big and a lot to take in. But here's something about SoCal that I learned very fast from Warren was this was record number of attendance for visitors, record number of attendance for vendors at CanJam. So this was a record day weekend for CanJam. And I noticed it right away. When I walked in the room, it was only 10 o'clock. They just opened. There was already a line outside for things like Headamp Room, for the, I think it was Bloom Audio and Meze. Even the Abyss Room had a line outside the door because you only get so many people in those side rooms. Now the big room, not so much the case because it's very spread out, but holy cow, just the number of vendors was astonishing. And the number of IEM vendors was astonishing too. I mean, this had to have been, I should have asked that question, but I feel like this was probably the most IEM vendors you would see in a United States CanJam, I would imagine. And it was impressive and a lot to take in when you first walk in there. And so I didn't really have an agenda going into this other than I just wanted to meet people, like I said. So kind of when I walked in, I just kind of walked around just to kind of see, what all was going on, who was there, what was new, what caught my eye. I took a lot of pictures, took a lot of video while I was there, and I'm going to pop that up as I'm talking through this so you don't just have to stare at me. You can if you want to. No, I'm kidding. So you don't have to just stare at me, but it was a lot of fun just walking around and talking with everybody. And I will say, like in day 1, I got 3 impressions, right? Right, like that. I got 3 impressions. The first one actually didn't happen inside the room. I skipped over this, and that was bumping into Tommy Tack of ETA. Now, he was there, and he had a headphone around his neck, and at first glance, I thought, okay, he's got the ETA 02 that he brought there. That's cool. It wasn't. It was actually a prototype that ETA is working on right now, and I was like, is that something new? And he's like, it's upcoming. It's something that we brought. And, I could tell they don't want to say too much about it because, it's not ready yet. I get that. No name to it, anything like that. But he did let me take a listen to it. And I happen to have the WooTube Mini that I will be doing a review on soon, just so you guys know. And I was like, hey, I got this tube amp with me. Do you mind if I check it out and throw it on there? He's like, sure. All I can tell you is what I heard was excellent. I mean, the O2, I like the O2. This was definitely better. They're working on something that's better, but they've got things to finalize with the tunings and with the power requirements and all of that. So they've still got more work to put into this. All I can say is thank you, ETA, for letting me experience that. And, for him walking around, letting others experience that as well, because that was a good listen. Now, on to the next thing, and that was inside the room, and that was the Drop and Grell collaboration headphone that they had there. Now, this one also isn't released yet, but I did get an slight impression of this one. So the first thing I can tell you about this headphone, not even sound-wise, is just the way they have designed the headphone is very interesting, and it is very unique, and I mean unique in a good way. I was very intrigued by this. The way that the driver is, it's got like this angled driver, so it doesn't go head on to your ear. It's more at an angle, and that they've got like a baffle, I guess you can call it that is on the kind of opposite side of the driver. So it faces this way, and it's like almost like a reflection for the damping factor. And it's supposed to add things like stage and things like that to it, because this is I believe it's a closed back headphone. I could be wrong on that. They don't have a price. They don't, they have the Drop Grell collaboration on it. I don't know if that's going to be the finalized name of it. The aesthetics of it were just, for me. I mean, that's obviously very subjective, but the sound impression I got to say there was good low end to it, and it sounded okay, but I could tell, it just wasn't a finished product yet. So that's why I didn't take too much to heart. And I do want to pause for a second there, guys, and talk to you about this with CanJams. And I mean no disrespect to anybody that goes to a CanJam for the intention of getting impressions of headphones. So please understand this. But I don't feel like trade shows like CanJam, especially this one in SoCal, are going to be the best way to get an impression of a sound out of a headphone. And the reason why I say that, one, is just the sheer amount of people there, right? I mean, especially if you're listening to open back headphones with a crowd around you, good luck. I mean, really focusing in on what you are hearing. Even if you're, wearing a closed back headphone, and I tried out several of those. I tried out several IEMs. You might be thinking, well, IEMs, they're sealed in. You should be able to get a good sound impression. The problem with me, and this is just me, is like, I can't focus 100% if I know there's somebody waiting over my shoulder to test it. And I'm just that person that's always going to feel like, well, I don't want to sit here too long. This guy wants to sit down and hear it. And, maybe he doesn't get a chance to hear this stuff much. Maybe he came just for this thing. So I need to get up, move. And, all that's running through my head while I'm trying to listen to whatever audio track I have pulled up. Now, I did have a set number of songs on my phone that I wanted to listen to so I could easily pull them up either on their device or just plug my phone into the dongle. I brought my RU7 along so that I could do that with IEMs and the Woo Mini, as I said. But I don't think you're going to really, like, if you're taking tons of notes and all these kind of details and things, I mean, good for you for being able to get that detailed in it. I just can't do it. And I don't mean to go on a tangent about that. It's just, I want you guys to know that up front because, I know on some previous CanJam videos I've done, I've had people comment and say, don't give me an impression of just, hey, that sounded great. I'm sorry. I mean, that's kind of sometimes the impression I get is it sounded great or it was just meh, but then I might get something in, right, and get a chance to actually sit down with it. That's when I can give you the proper impression of it. And sometimes it's completely opposite of what I first heard, good or bad, at a CanJam. So anyways, I digress. I will move on. Thank you for paying attention and listening to that or skipping over it, one of the two. Right, and so I remember the next thing that I checked out because they were kind of around the corner from there was the Austrian audio headphone. It was called the Composer. A lot of people were talking about this headphone, so Tyler and I were kind of like, hey, let's go check that out. So we went over, sat down, Tyler got to listen, I got to listen, and again, this is what I'm going to tell you is like the impression I got was okay. It was nothing over the top on anything. It had good stage, I remember that, and it definitely had good transient response. So there was a lot of rhythm to it. And I remember whatever track I was listening to, I was kind of nodding my head along to it. That's a good thing. I mean, you want to get involved with your music when you're listening to something. But I literally listened for a 2-track listen. There was a lot of people wanting to check out that headphone. I like the aesthetic of it. I enjoyed talking to the guys there about their headphone, and you could just tell, their passion of getting that out to everybody. And I think that also brings more people with interest in when you have people that are very passionate about their product talking to you about it. So the Composer is something I definitely would love to get more time with in the future because my immediate listen was good. It was positive. It wasn't, like I said, anything that blew me out of the park, but it definitely was not bad either, and just something I want more time with. So now on from there, I actually stopped off at the Schiit boot. The Schiit boot. I didn't have shit on my boot, and I mean shit like SCHITT. Don't ban me, YouTube, like they would. But no, the Schiit audio booth. I talked to Jason Stoddard. Let me just get that out of there. But this is my first time meeting Jason in person. Not that I've ever talked to him really before, but man, what a down-to-earth, just chill guy, I gotta say, And even when I watch his videos, that's kind of the impression I got of him, but you just never quite know. And just meeting him, I immediately told him, like, the Magni and Modi were my first two, in my opinion, like pro audio gear that I own for headphones. And, went down the rabbit hole ever since then. But, I thanked him for that. I just told him, I was like, man, I love those. I still have a Magni, and I love the Magni and Modi. And I said, what do you have anything new coming out here? And he was talking about the seminar that he was going to do the next day covering the Midgard. And I definitely want to check out that headphone amp. I think it's going to be somewhere around $250. I didn't get a chance to listen to it at CanJam, but there's a lot of controversial things with that amp when it revolves around measurements and things and Synad and all of that stuff that I really don't care to get too deep in the weeds with, but it was something that Jason brought up, and I know how passionate he is about his products just based on all the videos I've watched, and you could just hear it again in his voice when he talked about it. And I didn't check out any of the seminars because that wasn't on my agenda for this CanJam, but I hope somebody recorded it because I'd love to see how that seminar went. So that was a very nice time getting to meet Jason Stoddard of Schiit and the whole crew there as well. All right, so then if I can remember after that, I think Tyler and I caught up with Sebastien Seb of Dunu and Kinera. You guys, if you've seen Seb, I'll put a picture up. You know what I'm talking about. Super good guy. And we met up, kind of went to lunch. And afterwards, I wanted to check out the Tungsten. And around that time, our buddy Beef Supreme happened to show up to this CanJam as well. Also ran into another Discord friend of mine, goes by Sith Assassin on there. And the three of us checked out, four of us, five of us, because he had his dad there too. Wow. We checked out the Tungsten, the new Modhouse. And that is a headphone I need more time with. So I only got a chance to listen to the single-sided Tungsten, which is really unfortunate because the double-sided everyone said was better. But the single-sided I think is around $1,500. And when I sat down and listened to it, I could tell that I don't remember what amp they had hooked up to it, but this headphone is going to require some juice to get it up and going. And I remember like listening to the single-ended, the bass was distorting a little bit if you got it a little too loud. It had good bass, but just got a little out of control with too much loudness going on. And I could just tell, like I said, it needs more power to drive it. So I think this is definitely going to be a headphone that is going to be amp dependent. And I did find that out at the end of day 2 when I talked to some people about the Tungsten, that it is very amp dependent and picky on that. And it's something that synergies are really going to matter with that headphone. Now, to go back to the double-sided, I gotta say, sadly enough, that just the aesthetic alone, I was like, that looks like a headphone I'd like to own someday. I mean, it just reminded me of a ZMF and something that it was like this nice purple designed cup that it had on it, and just, feeling it in your hand, just the nice weight of it. And it was heavy, but not overly heavy, especially when I put it on my head. Just a well-built product. And I wanted to listen to it. I just didn't get a chance to, and I wanted to get back to it, and I just didn't. So, I mean, that is what it is. But like I said, that is another one that's on my list to hopefully get an impression out, do a video out, and who knows? Maybe I'll own one someday, because I was really impressed by the Tungsten and what they had going. And that was a headphone, I gotta say, probably was in my top 3 of most talked about headphones at CanJam, and in my top 3 at least of my most interested headphones that I saw at CanJam was definitely the Tungsten by Modhouse. All right, and so from there, I kind of bumped into Warren again, and he asked how I was doing with meeting people. And man, Warren, if you're watching this video, just thank you. You are like, I was telling Tyler this, you're kind of like the Zach of Heddfi, Zach and Bevan of ZMF of Heddfi. You're just such a good dude, man, and just a great guy to interact with, and no strangers, and it's excellent. I mean, he really introduced me to a lot of people at this CanJam and helped me out. I'll be honest with you guys. I mean, this was more of a business purpose for me coming to CanJam, more so than it was about listening to the gear, so that I can meet some vendors and kind of introduce them to me and my channel, and, see what ways I can contribute more to this hobby. And Warren's a big part of that. And I just really appreciated bumping into him and for all the advice and things that he gave me. And just, like I said, just bringing me around and introducing me to people. I got to talk to Odyssey Group on that first day. Had a really good interaction with Ari, I hope I'm saying that right, of Odyssey. And I really appreciated that. I met some of the other vendors around. I dropped by the Dunu and Kinera booth on the first day, as I said, talking to Sebastien there as well. But that was kind of rounding out day 1 for me towards the end there. And then that night, of course, had dinner, with my buddy Tyler and a group of people there as well. That was a great time. And I knew that day 2, Tyler had to leave town. I was going to be on solo on myself. So that was going to be listening day for me. So now day 2 is where I have some true just notes and impressions of a lot more gear. And I'm going to walk you through that one next. Or maybe I won't, because actually I'm going to backtrack for a second there, because day 2 started with me going down to the lobby, grabbing some food for breakfast, a coffee, and I had my notebook out, and I was trying to kind of wrap my thoughts around day 1 just so I didn't lose track of things and write some notes. And I'm sitting there at a table by myself, and Spirit Torino And a couple other people walked up and they were like, hey, do you mind if we sit here? I was like, no, not at all. So they sat down, they were talking about some things and I was writing some notes. Well, sitting next to me was a guy named Bear. Now, Bear is actually, I believe the owner at least of EarMicro and makes the T10 Bespoke, really fancy earbuds. Probably don't even like calling them earbuds, but they are. They're earbuds, true wireless. And at one point he looked over at me and he's like, saw me writing down notes. He's like, hey, who are you? What's your name? And, we introduced each other. I told him I had a YouTube channel, all that. He's like, oh, really cool. He's like, have you checked out my product? Well, I remember at CanJam in Chicago, Bree and I, when we were there, we did stop by EarMicro and saw the T10 Bespoke, and I was just astonished by it, but I didn't think it was something you could actually listen to. I thought they were just kind of showing the product, not necessarily as a listening demo because, they're wireless. Well, not true. I mean, he told me that, hey, come check out my booth. I'll give you a nice demo. You can see what we're all about. But we talked for, I don't know, probably a good 20 minutes, again, about audio, but then about things not audio, family-wise and things, where he's located, where I'm located. And just, like I said, again, that is the part that I enjoyed the most about this CanJam, which is meeting all the different people. And Bear was another super cool guy and just really, had fun talking to him and meeting him, and definitely wanted to keep it on my list to go check out his booth, which I absolutely did. Now, when I got onto the floor for day 2, actually isn't the first place I started. The first place I started was the Head 2 booth, Heddphone, HEDD, Phone 2 booth. This was another headphone that was talked about a lot going into this CanJam, and so I wanted to listen to it, but I had never heard the first headphone, to be honest. So I sat down, and the Headphone 1 was available for me to listen to on the RME 80i2 deck, which is great because I have that at home here. And so I listened to that, and the first thing I noticed on the impression of the Headphone 1 was it's ginormous, and it was heavy. And I was like, this... right away, I can tell you this is never something I'd want to own just because it's too heavy. But listening to it, it was okay. It wasn't anything just over the top. Now, I know when it first came out, it was very popular, and I could see, why. Again, very fast impression, but it was just okay. But talking to the guys there, I think his name was Mason, and I hope I don't get that wrong. But we had a good conversation while I was waiting for the headphone. And I noticed that they had the Headphone 2 on the RME 80i2 deck, and then they had one next to me that was on the Lena stack. This is the other thing I want to say for you guys that are going to CanJams is if you're getting an impression of a headphone, definitely do that, but pay attention to what it's paired up with. Now, I told him, honestly, I said, I don't want to listen to this headphone on the Lena stack. I mean, I do, but I don't, because the Lena stack is so out of reach for me to ever own. It's like a $30,000 stack, or maybe even higher than that. And it's something I would never own. So I want to listen to a headphone on something I have the chance to at least own or similar to my gear at home. And that's just not. And so I'm not telling you don't do it at all. I'm just saying to hamper your expectations, because if you listen to a piece of gear on something phenomenal like that, and you go out and you buy it and you get it home and you're like, this doesn't quite sound like that. That's why. So I think it's a good idea. And this was something else that, Tyler and I talked about on my stream, is that if you see an amp around that room that is something that either you have or similar to have, talk to the vendors there. A lot of them are very accommodating, and they'll tell you like, yeah, if you want to borrow this and go over to that amp, you can plug it in there, or vice versa. I'm not saying all of them will, but ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. If they say no, they say no. No big deal. But a lot of these guys are going to be accommodating for that because, yes, they're there to show off their product, but you're there as a consumer. Don't forget that. And if it's something you want to hear to decide if you want to purchase it and you want to do an impression there properly, do yourself a favor and do it properly. Do it on something you'll hear at home. All right, I got way off topic there, but back to the Headphone 2. I sat down and listened to that on the RME 80i2 DAC. It was okay. I wouldn't say it was like, oh, this is terrible, put the headphone down and walked away, but it was just okay. I like bass, and it's very bass light, and I think it's even more bass light than the HD800S. And so to me, that was just not an engaging listen for me enough to where I really, really enjoyed it. There's a lot of other things going on for it that were good. Don't get me wrong. Again, though, that's just my very quick impression on the ADI2 DAC. That's the other thing I will tell you too, is I don't usually use my ADI2 DAC at home on the amp version because I don't always care for the sound it produces with the amp on headphones. Now in IEMs, that's a different story. And so that's part of it too, right? That's why I'm not telling you that the Heddphone 2 is not good. I don't know that. I haven't heard it on everything. I haven't heard it on other amplifiers and things. I just know in my immediate impression, it was just okay, but nothing special. So from there, I actually left the room, went back into the ZMF room because I didn't actually sit down with the bokeh and I didn't sit down with the JDS Labs amp, and they had both paired up together right inside the room. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I got to tell you that my impression of that headphone from Chicago to SoCal went up. And this is definitely a headphone that I cannot wait to cover on a review and to get a longer listening with, and especially with the amp too, because it was a good sound. I know this headphone's going to come in somewhere around $1,000 is what Zach is saying. And it's his like portable version because it's 80 ohms, I believe, somewhere around there. So you're going to be able to drive it much easier than other ZMF headphones. But on that amp, I got to tell you, it was a nice combination. There was more low end, which is what I felt that headphone probably was lacking a little bit. So I got a little more of that. I got excellent mid-range. That typical ZMF house sound was there. So I got some good punchiness of it and some decent details. Resolution, I think you can tell that's where it was, you know, not quite to the level of other ZMFs. But again, that was my fast 5 to 10 minute impression. I will tell you that impressions in rooms that are off to the sides are much easier to do than impressions in that giant room, unless you're in the Warwick booth that they had, the listening booth. That was super cool. So yeah, I mean, my impression was very positive for that. And I was very excited to be able to finally listen to that in more of a finalized version. I think Zach may still have one or two things to do, but he's got the name on it. He's got the card and everything. So they're pretty much getting ready to go with that headphone. Now from there, I went over to the Bloom Audio room, and actually the Bloom Audio guys, they actually had the cables there for the Eletech. And those are some very fancy cables. I mean, just the quality of materials, and was a really impressive cable to hold in my hand. I love headphone jewelry, or IM jewelry, you can say. And that's what the cables are to me. Now, I'm not going to say that there's not audio advantages to those as well, because I'm sure there is. I've just never had one of those cables on hand of the higher, you know, quality, higher expensive cables to really tell you if I've heard that. I just love the look of them, man. They were super impressive, and was nice to, you know, again, meet those guys there at Bloom Audio. From there, I didn't leave, I didn't leave the Bloom Audio room yet, because on the other side there, they actually had Meze represented, and I wanted to meet the guys there because, you know, I've worked on some different headphones with Meze. Very nice to meet those guys. And I sat down with the 109 Pro, which I have the 109 Pro, or had the 109 Pro. So, I mean, I didn't really need to get a listen on it, other than I like the look of the Primal that they have coming out on a limited version. That is a gorgeous headphone. And, you know, no surprise, another solidly built Meze headphone. But they had the Empyrean, and I had not heard the Empyrean yet. So I sat down with that for, you know, just a few minutes just to get a listen out of the Empyrean, and finally be able to say I've heard every Meze headphone in their lineup outside of the Neo. And it was good. Honestly, the Empyrean's probably not in my preferences of sound signature, but it was a good listen regardless of that. So now I left that room and actually went over and finally heard a Stax headphone. Did not care for that, honestly. I know it's not for everybody, and, you know, electrostat and things like that. It wasn't. I mean, I sat down and listened to it. It was too bright. It was very detailed, just too bright, and I just didn't enjoy the listen. And I actually did listen to that on a couple of different amplifiers there. But there was also Woo Audio represented there, and Abyss was there. And I talked to Abyss for a little bit on their new headphone with the Diana MR. And then I also saw they had the Diana TC there. They had the 1266, and they had those paired up with some Woo amps. Now, I had my Woo Tube Mini with me, And since I had it with me, I wanted to ask some questions to Mike, who was there with Woo. And we ended up talking for a good 10 minutes at least on his amplifiers, but also on the Tube Mini. And I got some pretty good information on the Tube Mini. One thing I will tell you is the response for the Mini has been excellent. They're actually sold out. If you go to their site, they're sold out. Other sites are sold out of those as well. People are really digging that amplifier, and I understand why, as you'll see my review here soon. It's an excellent portable tube amplifier. I mean, it really is. And listening to it on a 1266, I mean, are you kidding me? You're not, because they actually were doing that and getting a decent sound impression out of it as well. I mean, that's pretty crazy for an amp like that. But I digress, because I actually did listen to the WA23 Luna, I believe is what it was called. And that is their like $9,000 tube amplifier from Woo, and I listened to the Diana TC and the MR on that, and both were excellent listens. Now, I got to say, the MR, I think, is Abyss's new step down, and I shouldn't even say step down because it's still $3,000, but step down compared to the $4,000 and $5,000 headphones you can see there, and that this is supposed to be more of a, not portable, but just work with a lot more devices, such as the Tube Mini and things like that. And I got a good sound impression, very detailed, very good mid-range, a little bit lacking on dynamics for my flavor, as far as punch and slam, things like that, and a nice, good planar low end, especially on that monster of a tube amp, was an excellent listen. So, you know, that was my fast impression of Diana and my fast impression of Woo Audio, and getting a chance to meet Mike there. Yeah, I've definitely appreciated that one. All right, so going back into the main room, I actually talked to Michael of VZR, and I bumped into him on day one, and we had a nice conversation about audio, and actually gaming audio and sound engineers and all of that. And he was there with somebody else who was actually representing Cavelli for their headphone amplifiers. And I found out something that is not a secret, but something I wanted to share with you guys, and that I love the liquid platinum amplifier that Monolith put out. Well, if you look on there, it's discontinued. So I asked him about it, because they had a couple of amplifiers there from Cavelli, but they didn't have the liquid platinum. And I told him how much I enjoy that amp. He said, well, you'll be happy to know we're going to start making those again, just not under the brand of Monolith. It's going to be under something else. Man, I was excited to hear that, because I want to see what else they're going to come out with, because the liquid platinum is such a good amplifier, in my opinion, for what it does. Anyway, while he was there, I also was talking to Michael, like I said, of VZR. Now, VZR actually has a Model 1 headphone that started off as, you know, your typical audiophile headphone, but then they realized the advantages of getting into the gaming space. And so that headphone actually came out in 2021, and it was made more for a gaming headphone. And they actually have the port that you can plug in a microphone boom to and actually use it for gaming. I gotta say, I sat down and listened to that in day two. That was a good listen. I wasn't sure what to expect. There was actually some good punch to it and some good mid bass. Now I kind of question, because I know he said a lot of Call of Duty players really like his headset. Now it's kind of concerned, because you do get some of that oomph in that bass that it might drown out some footsteps and things. But I will say also, it had good high treble frequencies and some details. Probably could be bright for some people. It's closed back, but it sounded very open on the design that they had for that headphone. So I wrote down a lot of notes simply because I was just intrigued by it. And I know they're going to be coming out with some new things here soon, which I definitely am going to check out when they do, because this was a headphone that I honestly, until that day, had never heard of. And then after I looked it up, I was like, okay, yeah, you know, there's actually some positive reviews and people that have, you know, checked out their headphone. And I can see why. I mean, even aesthetically, I could see it. It's like a gamer's looking headphone. And so I appreciated that of it. Easy to drive. And like I said, overall impression sounded fantastic for, I think, $349 that it was coming in at. So, and Michael, again, a great guy to talk to. And we had a long conversation about not just, you know, his headphone and things, but about how he got started in the business. You know, I think he did some audio engineering for, you know, some video games and things. And that was impressive enough to me that we got off on a tangent talking about that and how I truly believe that some video game audio gets overlooked and is kind of looked to as, just use whatever. But anyways, yeah, it was a fun conversation to have with that guy, and was a very good guy to talk to. So, you know, if you happen to be watching this, thank you. And I appreciated that experience. Now, Moving on from there, I bumped back into Bear from that morning on day 2, and I stopped by the EarMicro booth with the T10 Bespoke earbuds, and I spent a lot of time there. I took a lot of pictures, I took some video. I was very impressed with just the design behind the product, all of the technology that they put into the app, into all the different things that you can do, head gestures, even, little clicks and things you can do with your tongue to make it react a certain way, voice commands. This is a technology that if he gets this to more a consumer-based standpoint, he's going to strike some gold there, because right now this is a very high end. I even asked him, I said, what's your target audience? And he said, rich people. I was like, okay, well, hey, that's fair. At least you know it and say it. His top of the line one, I think I looked it up online, is like $38,000. So, yes, we are talking about fancy stuff. But I think, it goes all the way down to around the $3,000 mark, which for a true wireless earbud, yeah, that's a lot of money. But when you look at the technology behind it and you look at the build and just the attention to detail they put into it, I think the case I was holding, I was talking to one of the guys there, it was purple, and I was like, wow, this thing's beautiful. He's like, yeah, that's actually a stingray skin on the case. I was like, what? Yeah, you like feel on it's amazing, man. It was just a fun thing to experience. And that was actually a booth at Chicago, like I said, that I didn't know you could actually get a listen on. And so I was glad that I bumped into that morning so I could get a listen. I didn't write down any notes on my sound experience from this earbud because I was more interested in all the technology behind it. But the sound experience was obviously good in it. Otherwise, I would have been like, okay, this was a big letdown. The other thing with that technology that I thought was really interesting was their AI-generated EQ profiles. So basically what that means, and I hope I'm saying this right from what he told me, is, it actually uses this AI technology that it has a mass number of tracks and albums and things it goes through, and it automatically will spit out an EQ profile per song that this earbud will think works best for a listening experience. So like, a certain track you might pull up, it might give you this huge bump to the treble because maybe the mixed way of that song, you didn't get a lot of treble, or maybe a big bump in bass because when it was mixed, didn't have a lot of bass. You get what I'm saying? And you could see that as you go through each track on that earbud. And I was like, even though I don't like EQ, that's pretty damn cool. And that was really neat to see. And, I don't even call it a party trick because there's a lot of thought that goes behind something like that. And so, Bear, you had a lot of energy, man. And just, I really appreciated meeting you. And, that was another very enjoyable experience for me and something I would highly recommend others to check out as well. And just see the guy's passion behind that. And you'll appreciate that in general. So across the aisle there, I stopped and talked to Ampsandsound, and Justin was there with his wife and his daughter. And, that alone, I was missing my kids. So I felt like I sat down there and just saw them all sitting there as a family and almost brought a tear to my eye. And I was like, I don't know. That's really cool that they do all that together in their business. And I got to listen to his monster of an amp. It's red. The name eludes me, bad with names, but I got the chance to listen to that with the LCD-X. I also got to listen to the Sennheiser HD100S that he had there. Plus I talked to Justin for a little bit, again, not just about his amplifiers and things, but just about him and his business and having his, wife and his daughter involved with it. One of his amps, the Kenzie's, named after his daughter, which I don't know. That's cool, man. And just another person that was fantastic to meet and to listen to his gear. And it sounded damn good. Really good. That was my first time actually listening to an LCD-X, so probably not the best example, like I said from earlier, to listen on such a good amplifier as I did, but that was a very good listen on the LCD-X. And then the 800S that I just reviewed, listening on his amp, I got a little bit more low end, not a ton. It's not like it suddenly made it a bass master's dream or whatever you want to call, but it just sounded really good on his amplifiers. And, he's definitely got products that I want to check out in the future, if anything, for the fact that I know how much passion he puts behind it. So great experience again. Oh, and by the way, that amplifier is called the Red October because it just hit me and I didn't want to miss that. Excellent amplifier. All right, now we're moving on. All right, so in that same aisle from my memory there, I bumped into Sam, of Dekoni and talked to him for a little bit. Didn't have anything new going on there, but they do have some upcoming pads for, I believe, the 109 Pro they'll have coming out, as well as some modifications for the Cobalt headphone that they had at CanJam in Chicago as well. Nice to connect with him again. But also in that aisle was Dunu, and next to Dunu was Fat Frequency. So I checked out both of those, not necessarily next, but I'll talk about those next. So Dunu had the Glacier, which is their new IEM that's coming out. I think it's I want to say their flagship. And I liked the sound of the Glacier for the short sample that I got out of it, but it was a good listen, and that is all I'm going to give you guys because I didn't remember to take down notes when I was listening to it. But then I also listened to their headphone, and their headphone, let me look at my notes so I can tell you the name of that. And the headphone's name is the Arashi, I believe is how they're saying it. It's planar magnetic headphone. Now it's not out yet. They're still finalizing some things with the tunings, but my first impression of it was positive. There was good overall tonal balance throughout the frequency response. And for a first introduction of a headphone from Dunu, it's going to be a little bit on the high end. I think it's around $1,500, I think, is what they were telling me. I did like the aesthetic of it. It was very nicely built, and it was comfortable on my head and had a good sound right out the gate. I didn't get any like overly brightness, but it definitely peaked there a little bit on the brighter side. Some planars will do that to me anyway, but there was that nice low end coming through, and I got a decent mid-range response. That's about all I'm going to give you guys in that one because, again, they are still trying to finalize that headphone. But right next to them was Fat Frequency. And actually, the two guys there that I met was Aaron and Ivan, and they had all of their product lineup there, but they have a new one that's called the Scarlett Mini IEM. Okay, they shouldn't call it the Mini because holy cow, you want to talk about bass. Now, that was just a straight up fun listen IEM. I think it's coming in at right around $800, so it's not cheap, but there is a 30 dB bass boost, and I did not say that wrong. A 30 dB bass boost on that IEM, and that has some slam. That thing was just incredible. It's V-shaped, of course, but it was just incredible amount of bass on there. And if you're a bass head, I mean, check that one out for sure. I mean, that was my impression, bass. That's all I had to write down, right? I mean, that doesn't mean the rest of the sound signature was awful. It's just bass. So I had a lot of fun listening to that. I was like, I don't want to listen to anything else of yours because I got to move on, unfortunately, but I wanted to check out the new upcoming thing. And I heard other people saying, dude, you got to check out the Scarlett Mini and just check out the bass on that. Yeah, they were right. Just a lot of bass on that IEM. All right. So speaking of IEMs, I kind of went on a tangent of IEM listening from there and stopped by a lot of IEM booths that I normally would not have heard of or probably not have thought to check out before. And the first one of that was actually Visioneers. And I listened to their first, or not their first, but I listened to their flagship VE10. And as far as my notes for that, you know, it had great low end. It was punchy, good details. It was chunky. I do remember writing that down because when I put it in my ears, I was like, yeah, this thing's pretty thick. And that's my main problem with IEMs and why I'm not into IEMs near as much as headphones is the comfort factor of them. And because some of them can be a little too chunky for me to where it'll bother me wearing it for a certain amount of time. But I got to say, for a flagship, the VE10 was a very solid listen. Now from there, I actually stopped by the guys over at Spirit Torino because I wanted to listen to their, I think it's the Twin Pulse IEM that looks a lot like their Pulsar, I believe is what it's called. And I could be saying that wrong. Their headphone, it's just a miniature version of that, if you will. And I remember thinking when I looked at it online, I was like, I really hope that's not as heavy as the headphone is. It's not. So it's actually made out of a different material even, and it's very lightweight. It's a little odd, I would say, in the shape of the IEM because it's just like the cylinder shape that goes right in your ear. So I didn't do like the shake test or anything like that, but I do wonder, how that's going to fit on some people. Now, it doesn't bump against the side of my ear, so I did like that part. The listen I got of that was very short again, and they do have 3 different tuning nozzles. I got to say the tuning nozzle I had definitely was the one that had the least amount of bass, but I know they have one that gives it more bass. So if I had some more time with it, I would have a better impression. I wasn't overly impressed by the sound, and unfortunately with Spirit Torino headphones, I haven't been impressed with anything I've heard so far. They've all just been okay. Nothing's been absolutely terrible. They've just been okay. And this IM was no different. I did like the aesthetic, and I got to say the aesthetics of all of their products always interest me. I mean, I cannot ever just not stop by and check out Spirit Torino for what they have going on. And Andrea that I met there, again, you know, got a chance to talk to him, and he's always very passionate about his, you know, products that he has. And the other guy there, and I apologize for the not naming him, but both of them, you know, are always very passionate about their products, and it's always good to see them at these trade shows when I visit. Now from there, I stopped over at Timsock, which was another IM I had never checked out before. Now Timsock had IMs there that are not yet released, so they didn't even have names to them. All I can tell you was that I listened to a black one that was sparkly, and it sounded really good. Really, really good. It had good bass, good mid-range, good treble response, wasn't too peaky or anything. It was just a solid listen, and, you know, again, only listened to like one track for it, so that's all I can tell you is that my impression of it was positive. But when I asked him there about it, he said, yeah, we don't have a name for it yet. We don't really have a price yet. These are upcoming. We're just trying to get some impressions from people. And I said, well, you got a good one from me, because I really like the sound and I love the aesthetic of their IEMs, all of them, not just the one I listened to. They were very good, gotta say. So from there, I think right across the way, I stopped at the Moondrop booth and I listened to their Alice, I want to say is what it was. I didn't really care for that. I mean, it was, again, short impression, but my short impression was I didn't really care for that. And the aesthetic of it was just okay. It was honestly the only one that was available because there was a line of people there to check out their products. So that was the only one that I could check out. From there, I did move on to Campfire Audio, because actually the first night of CanJam, that night, I was downstairs and had a drink, and Campfire Audio was down there, and they were just kind of hanging out. And so I got to meet those guys and had some really nice conversations. Again, not so much about audio, but a little bit, because we did talk about IMs, especially how it relates from America to overseas and all of that. And was just, you know, fun to hear their perspective of that as they've been across to, you know, see both ends of that. And Campfire Audio is one that I've always been interested to check out anyway. And so I did stop and listen to the Bonneville, which I think is their highest on their recent line. It's like a pinkish purple, like a pastel purple, I guess you could call it. I really like the colorways of all four of them. And the Bonneville, it sounded good. I had a good first impression out of that. Again, no really detailed notes to share with you guys, but it was one that I definitely would like to check out in the future if I could, to get some more time with that. You know, I paired it up with my own RU7, but I had a very short listen because it was another area that when I stopped by, there were people waiting. Again, there's people waiting. I'm trying to get a fast listen and move on and be good, bad, and it was good. So thank you again to Campfire Audio, and was a pleasure meeting you guys. All right, just a couple more, you know, impressions I want to share with you guys. The first one is I stopped by the Kinera Audio booth. I wanted to meet up with Sebastien there and the guy that was there with him from Kinera Audio. And I just basically asked him, like, what do you recommend I get set up with to start with? And I listened to the Imperial first. And I think, if I remember, it's around $650, somewhere in there. And I really dug the sound of the Imperial. It was more of my preference. It had good, you know, enough good low end to it, had good mid-range, and didn't have so much sparkle that it was bright, and was just a really smooth listen. I remember writing that down. Again, quick impression, but I enjoyed that. And then the next one that he set me up with was the Nana, and honestly didn't care for that. And I know it was more expensive. I think that one's running closer to $1,000, but this is where, and Sebastien and I talked about this, like, you can't always look at price and think this is better because it costs more. Absolutely not. I mean, if something is not in your preferences, price goes out the window. And it's really just about, you know, what you enjoy to listen to. And I definitely enjoyed to listen to the Imperial better. So again, Sebastien, thank you, man. Nice to meet you in person. I appreciated the listen at the Kinera booth, and that was a lot of fun. And I enjoyed the listen. Now, from there, I actually did stop off at the Yamaha booth, and I kind of circled back around to them because I wanted to check out their new flagship headphone. And, you know, they have two different pads. You can do the suede or you can do leather pads. And I remember when I first put it on and I listened to the suede pad of the Yamaha, I really dug that sound. And it was on their own amplifier, and I didn't catch the name of it, but it's really shiny. I remember that. I probably have some pictures that I'm popping up, but I've heard hit and miss things with the Yamaha headphone. Now, I personally enjoyed it. And again, I didn't write down a ton of details about what I enjoyed about that headphone because, you know, didn't have a lot of time to do that, but I did personally enjoy it. But as I was there, he said, well, let me switch out the pads for you. And he put on the leather perforated pads. Yeah, I didn't care for that. It dropped out the bass. It did make things more clear. The details came out more, but that also brought some brightness to me that I do remember writing down and thinking, I don't like that listen with the leather perforated pads. But this is a very high-end, expensive headphone, quite honestly. Not sure what I heard matches up with the price, but again, would be something I would love to sit down with someday and check out in further detail. Now, the last thing that I checked out before I left CanJam was the AudioTechnica booth. And the lady I talked to there, again, very nice, very accommodating, asked me what I wanted to check out. They had a limited run flagship headphone, and I don't even remember writing down the name because I got distracted with something else, but it was a beautiful headphone. But I didn't get a chance to listen to that one, and she even told me, I don't know if I necessarily do that because we don't know if we're going to have these again, but they had another one again. Right now, I'll backtrack there because I just Googled the name of that headphone, and it was the ATH W2022, W2022. It's a $9,000 headphone. I did not listen to that one because it's on a very limited run, but the one that I did listen to was the ATH AWKT. Sorry, I'm looking over at the screen there so I don't get that wrong. Now, that one is a $2,000 headphone, and I was getting a decent enough listen out of it to think that I wanted to check it out further. But at that point, honestly, I got stopped by Warren, who happened to be running around looking for me for some things. He grabbed me and we went off to do some other things. And that's kind of how CanJam ended for me, at least that experience. Now, actually, I got to backtrack this really quick because right after I left the AudioTechnica area, I actually did stop by Dan Clark Audio with Warren. Got a chance to quickly meet Dan Clark. I think I met him quickly at Chicago last year, but this was more of an in-person meeting. It was very nice to talk to Dan Clark just for a quick minute because he had a lot of people waiting to talk to him. And Andy Reagan again, I had talked to him in Chicago, talked to him again here at this one. And, we always have a nice little back and forth conversation, especially on the review process and all of that with the, headphones and things that we do. And was just really nice to meet both of those guys and to meet Andy again and talk to him and have that experience. And so then from there, I moved on to, this is going to be my segue. My experience continued further as, I went outside of CanJam and I met up with a lot of the Watercooler group guys from Heddphone. And again, I don't have names for everybody. So if you're watching this, please don't hurt me for that. I'm terrible with names, guys. I believe Scott was one I talked to. I know obviously John I talked to. I know Warren was there. Goldberger, I finally got a chance to meet him in person and just had a lot of fun. And we just, really just wrapped it up and talk about a lot of different things in the audio business and CanJam and personal experiences and what we like, what we don't like, and how everybody in this hobby is right. And it's true. I mean, it's such an enjoyable hobby. And those are the moments that I was hoping to have in CanJam and that I experienced at CanJam in SoCal and that I wanted to share with you on this very long video that I will have chapters on, by the way. But that was just like the perfect way for me to end my CanJam experience, was talking with those guys and meeting them. And I got a chance to, I think it was Goldberger that I got a chance to go ahead and have him listen to a set of Porta Pros because he had never heard them before and I had them in my bag. And I was like, you have to hear what these sound like for as cheap as they are. I think we all got a group picture. I think Zeos was even around there and we got a group picture with all that. It was just a lot of fun and was just a very nice way to kind of put the cap on that experience for me at CanJam and seal it away and get to share with you guys today on this video. And I'm definitely going to be at future CanJams. I can't tell you which one it's going to be next because it all depends around my own personal work schedule and all of that. But I'm definitely going to be at many, many more of these, and hopefully with my wife next time because Bree enjoys them too. and I didn't get any pictures of myself because I'm just like that. I'm not going to be like, hey, here's my camera, take a picture of me. She did all that for me. So that is one thing I've learned from this is I'm going to get pictures more of myself experiencing this, as well as pictures of all these people that I talked to will help me with names. And if I didn't mention you and you're watching this video, it's no disrespect intended. I'm just trying to cover through all my notes. But I will tell you that it was very nice to see many of you again, especially Jude. I did bump into Jude at one point during CanJam. I know he helps organize this stuff. I can't imagine, everything that goes into that, and Ethan as well. You guys are incredible for organizing this event. Thank you so much. I appreciated it. I enjoyed it. And that is the way I'm going to end this video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Smash the like button if you want to. Join my channel. I would greatly appreciate that if you subscribe and see all the future stuff that I have coming out. And until then, guys, I will see you in the next one.